Let's kick off with how you decided to start Clockwise. Presumably, you were experiencing some pain points around the solution that you then came up with. So, yeah, maybe set the stage that way.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think to start a company in general, you have to have a screw loose. So I suppose the story starts when like I was walking down the street and tripped and fell and knocked my head really hard. And it was like, oh, I'm going to do something crazy today. Um, Joking aside, I'm a software engineer, and I was doing software engineering management at Salesforce. The company that I was at previously got acquired by Salesforce. We got pulled up into the mothership. And one very common complaint or observation on my team was that I don't have enough time to get my work done in the day. I'm taking my work home at night. I'm getting pinched during the course of the week. I'm not getting enough time to actually do it. And initially, I'm a bit of a productivity nerd in general. And initially, I would coach people on kind of best practices. It's like, okay, let's look at your schedule. Let's figure out like what availability you have. Let's try to, eliminate distractions, maybe manage your Slack notifications. And that's helpful. I mean, there's room for that for sure. But the thing that I kept on getting boxed in by was their calendar and their schedule. And if time's a river, the events on your calendar are kind of the rocks in the middle of the stream. Everything has to flow around them, especially if you're an individual contributor engineer on a team and you don't have really the ability to move those meetings. I mean, often you're attending because somebody asked you. Um, and and somewhat paradoxically, it's often the best engineers that get pinched the most because these are folks who are keynotes in the organization. They get sucked into recruiting calls because they're good at recruiting. They get tasked with PRs. They get tasked with one-on-ones that catch up with their team. They get pulled into doc reviews and spec reviews, and so the calendar ended up being this big pinch point in everything. And I was sitting there and I was just thinking, like, how crazy is it that we spend so much time and energy recruiting these amazing people. We give them, pretty generous salaries. If you're at Meta, you get paid $1 billion a year.
Mhm.
And then, and then you get thrown in the organization and it's like, you figure it out. You're on your own and go figure it out yourself. And so the spark was really just like, this cannot be the way to most effectively support our people. Like there's got to be a better way to manage time. There's got to be a better way to manage calendars. There's got to be a better way to get productive time on the schedule.
It's clearly an issue still. How does one manage their time, even probably with the tool? Like I
Yep.
assume there's ways to kind of prioritize certain things or, toggle to this is high priority or this you cannot move. How are most people using it? Like what's a good kind of case example
Yeah.
where it's definitely playing a big role?
Well, I'll hit on one thing first that you said, RJ, which is that it, we can help. If you think about that analogy of the river, we can kind of help unclog it so things flow better, but it's still on you, right? I mean, like at the end of the day, Clockwise isn't coming in and looking over your shoulder and be like, did you write that line? Did you complete that doc? Did you do that task? And that's one of the difficult things with productivity software in general is you can provide the tooling, but at the end of the day, it's still up to the individuals in the organization to create an environment where you can do great work. That said, I think that moving those rocks around the river is hugely impactful. So a good example is Uber. At Uber, Clockwise powers the entire engineering organization schedules. So we're a day zero tool for engineers who join Uber. You sign up for Clockwise, and what we're doing in mass is we are monitoring a lot of the meetings that are cadence meetings on our schedule. Uh, and like you said, there are certain meetings that should not move. And so you can, of course, set that. But there are a lot of meetings where, it has to be Thursday morning, but it really doesn't matter when it's Thursday morning. Or, we have to meet sometimes next week, just find the best time. And what Clockwise will do is look across everybody's schedules. So if you have, a 4-person sync, it'll look across all those attendees, their time zones, their preferences, what's happening on their schedule. And if it finds a better time, if Clockwise finds a better time for that, it'll nudge it to open up more heads down, productive focus time. So classic example is, you have a sync that your PM scheduled at 3 p.m. on a Thursday. And the reality is that sync is a recurring meeting. It was scheduled months ago. Everybody's schedule's changed. And Clockwise sees, hey, we could actually move this to 11:30 right before lunch, and it'll open up the afternoon for 3 of the engineers on that call. And if we've been given permission to manage that meeting and we see that time, it'll be moved for all attendees. And we've been doing this for 8 years, and so there's a tremendous amount of nuance under the hood. I mean, one example is we will never move a meeting that's happening within 24 hours. We don't want to surprise anyone. We will avoid, end of the days on Friday by default, no matter what you say. But the net result is that you have a schedule that's default better, that has more time for you to do great work without lifting a finger.
And as I understand, you have like 40,000 plus organizations now. Using Clockwise. Was it kind of strong out of the gates in terms of market adoption? How has kind of the customer base scaled?
Yeah. It'd be a dream. Like, it's every entrepreneur's dream that you build the product, you flip the switch, and then everybody just comes. For better or worse, that did not happen. We had multiple iterations on how to build this, and then multiple iterations on how to bring it to market. One of the dynamics that I think is particularly difficult about our space, and every space has their own nuances of what makes them difficult, but for our space, it's that time and calendar are perceptually controlled by the individual, and it's very, very personal. If I came in and told you how you have to spend every hour of your week, you'd probably, give me the middle finger. Because it is incredibly personal. It's how you live your life. But the organization really controls the culture and cadence of a lot of the meetings. When you look at your schedule, even though it feels very personal, if you look at who organized the events, I would bet for anybody in this audience, unless you're a solo entrepreneur or you're a contractor, if you're in a large organization, 80% of your meetings at least are organized by people other than yourself. And it's that intersection of the personal and the organization that's very difficult, because if we approach it from kind of a top-down deploy or a top-down sale, I think there's a little bit of trust that's lost in that, and there's some organ rejection. Individuals really have to find it themselves. We have to onboard them individually. We have to onboard them with grace and with nuance to collect their preferences so that they feel empowered and are empowered. But the real power is when people start to use it collectively, because then we can do things across those schedules. And so that was really a lot of the early day experimentation, is what is the right approach to the market. Ultimately, we landed on a product-led growth approach, even though in a lot of ways this kind of manifests as a top-down enterprise sale, because it does, ultimately the benefit is to the organization and mass. But we found that if we build something that's low friction, easy to adopt, really brings delight to those individuals, we gain trust and then can spread it across the organization in order to gain the right to do something in mass. Mm-hmm. And so the early days were experimentation with that. And when we started to see kind of that natural internal spread of the product, we'd land at an organization and then people would kind of organically start to adopt it with some degree of certainty. That's when we started to think, okay, I think the core mechanics are good enough that we can start to push this out to the broader market to try to gain adoption. And that has been the story to date. I mean, people will usually find it on their own. It might be an individual, they bring it into the organization, and then it starts to spread. Here and there, we have people who come knocking on our door, maybe a a productivity leader inside the organization or an engineering leader will say, hey, I really want to try this, and we'll support that as well. But usually it's an individual that brings it in and then it spreads.
And then the aspect of leadership and management, did that come somewhat naturally to you?
Yes and no. I mean, I think that with that same kind of challenging of authority, there's I don't know if these two go hand in hand, but they went hand in hand for me. Um, there was a desire to, okay, if I don't want to follow somebody else, then I want to be the person who's leading the charge. And so that puts me in a posture where I was pretty comfortable doing that and pretty comfortable leading when I was given the mandate to do so. And so I often, in school and in other areas, find myself, project leader, student council leader, stuff like that. And I enjoyed doing that. So there is kind of that side of it that's a knack, but just because you want to lead doesn't necessarily make you a good leader. And I think that the learning curve on me figuring out what it takes to lead, inspire, and gel great teams is something that I've been passionate about for a while, especially with Clockwise. There's another side of starting your own company is, yes, the technology side, yes, the product side, yes, pushing the boundaries, but there's also, I think it's pretty common among, not all founders, but a lot of founders, there's also an element of like, I want to build the machine the right way too. Like I want to build the company the right way, and I want to experiment with that. And for me, the biggest area of that is culture and figuring out team dynamics and like what makes for a great team. And I've learned a hell of a lot over the last 8 years of this journey. I mean, I think there are a lot of things that I did wrong at the start, even though I had been a manager, figuring out kind of how to build that DNA, and I'm still learning all the time. I don't think there's any stopping the amount that can be learned there.
Any recent insights that you feel like, if you had known this from the beginning, you could be further along?
Yeah. Man, there's so many. Well, I'll be vulnerable here. I think that I've only recently become more highly attuned to leadership hiring mistakes that I've made in the past. I am biased towards very curious, high bandwidth people. And I think it's not a bad bias to have. In some ways, it wasn't an unconscious bias. I was wearing that on my sleeve. That's what I wanted. But I think what I missed in that dynamic is a little bit of the fit of where the organization stands and what needs to be pressed forward. And those aren't always simpatico. We also bias towards high empathy, high EQ people because we really want to build a high trust environment. And finding the right intersection of high EQ driven, but willing to push is tricky. And I think it's that last element of really like finding an individual that's comfortable with, this sounds a little bit harsh, but comfortable with not being liked and comfortable with pushing outside of the team's comfort zone. I don't think that I nailed that. And I don't think that this is an unconscious bias. In retrospect, I think I thought I was because I was pushing for people who were driven, but being driven and having the willingness to push others into being uncomfortable is different. And I think that I missed that.
Can you tell us about the value that your investors have brought aside from the financial capital?
Yeah. So first I'll say, I think we've been tremendously lucky. The investors we have are absolutely top notch. And the more and more I talk to other entrepreneurs over my career, the more and more I'm conscious of how lucky we are. We have Steve Laughlin at Accel. We have John Lilly at Greylock. We have RJ Lumba at Bain Capital Ventures. These are three individuals who know the entrepreneur experience. They optimize for the long run. Like they never have felt pinched or pushed or prodded. I mean, like I've been pushed and prodded, but like in service of the company. And I think to answer your question, it's there that they provide high leverage. Like I've been able to use my board and my investors as really a group of coaches and counselors and advisors. And not everybody can do that. I want to caution. That's why I gave a little bit of the lead into the advice, because There are some investors that you shouldn't do that with. You do have to manage a little bit more thoughtfully. You do have to make sure that you're giving them the right information. Attention spans are short. You got to take advantage, and like you have to be careful about that. But I've gotten a lot of leverage out of being able to just call somebody up and talk through an issue. And I think every investor likes to market themselves as being able to do that, but not every investor can, because they have a tough time popping into the context of this company in this moment with these challenges and letting go of their broader thinking about like, where does this company need to be? And my investors are pretty damn good at that. And so I've been really lucky in that regard.